fun stuff.
Hope so.
Fun stuff.
So every time I have my team together, we try to do something a little bit focused around them. And I mean, the last few times we've done some stuff with Greg, and we did some mindfulness and meditation, and then Greg came and did some work with the supply chain team back in March. And I think, you know, it's so very critical that we take time when we're together to not focus on work and to really try and focus on, you know, things I think that are certainly important for me as your leader, which is making sure that you guys are taking care of yourself and finding time to do the things that you like to do. And especially for folks who travel a lot, like me, it can be hard to find that balance, but, you know, I'm maniacal about you guys making sure you take that time back, right? And I don't care where it is and when it is, but it's important to me that you find the time. If you've been traveling 60 hours, 70 hours a week, you know, whatever, you're away from your families and your friends and all of that, you have to find the time to do the things that bring you joy, and those things are often outside of work. Even though I know that we bring you joy. Anyways, I have known you guys, I guess, for not too long. I've known you a little bit longer because we worked at Orange together. So Matt is my trainer.
Sure.
I guess. I don't know, whatever you are. I'll let them sort of do their introductions as well, but Matt and Brandon have been doing a lot of work with teams and sort of corporate stuff, and we kind of started having a dialogue around, here's what I'm thinking, can you guys, you know, help me out with the space? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. So wanted to just kind of switch it up a little bit. And it was actually your article that you sent around last fall, just around self-care for HR professionals. It's like, who do we go and talk to when we have a problem? Me? Who do I go and talk to? My 10-year-old son? Yeah. Tell me about your problems, Mommy. Anyways, I'm very pleased that they're here with us. You guys, you know, we have until about 11:30, and then we're just going to order some lunch, so you're welcome to stay as long as you want. I hope that this is, you know, more conversational and stuff anyway. So do you need to be here so we can all sit?
I do not. No.
Okay.
No. First of all, thanks for having the two of us today. And when Sloan asked us to do this, we were excited because Brandon and I we get to do a lot of speaking engagements. Very rarely do we get to come into an intimate environment like this and speak to a small group of people. So if you're okay with it, we're going to sit down so this feels a little bit more conversational, so it doesn't feel like you have these two big people looping over you. I want this to feel like a conversation. So at any point in time, if you guys have any questions about anything that we are talking about, just put your hand up or ask us on the fly. Don't wait, don't hold back. Just let's have get a little bit of a dialogue going. And there'll probably be times in the conversation where we ask you things and we get your opinion or your feedback on stuff. So to tell you a little bit about ourselves, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about my personal story in a few minutes, but we always get asked what we are, and so and I get that question a lot, and I simply tell people we're coaches. It's so hard to qualify exactly what we do. We do coach in gyms. I also work as a therapist and ACASTer. But I think both of us have pretty interesting stories. And I'll let Brandon tell you a little bit about his story before I kind of pick up and tell you a more detailed version of how I got here in front of you guys today.
How you guys doing? It's fun to be here. So I'm not going to go too hardcore into my story right off the bat. I'll just save a little something for you guys. But like Matt said, it's kind of tough to quantify what we always do because there's so many things that we like to do. Like we're health and wellness practitioners and educators. Like we go in, talk to corporations and organizations, but I'm also a strength, endurance, adventure athlete, right? Which is fun to say. No one really knows what that means, but I take on endurance events. I always try to add a little bit of a strength component, which I'll dive into more about what I've done this year and in the past. And I'm a writer. I do a blog and I speak as well. And like I said, it's usually we're in the health and wellness community. We try to do a variety of things, whether it's fitness retreats. Me and Matt are trying to get on TV, and we're trying to do a whole bunch of different stuff. We're trying to get out there in front of as many people as possible so we can educate on self-care, because like we know now more than ever, self-care is an epidemic, right? Like we see it, it's crazy how many people are leaving work with anxiety and depression it's a tough thing to not to go through life holding that in. So we're here to help kind of just give you some tools and easy formulas to apply to your life, so it makes your life more enjoyable and exciting and fulfilling. And when you have that, you're better leaders, you're better individuals, you're better for your family, and it's overall just a better vibe for everybody. So
yeah, this is not a lesson. There's probably 10 people in this room that are smarter than both of us. So we just want to talk to you about our expertise, which is in the health and fitness world, but also, so a little bit about myself. I was a hockey player all my life, and at the highly competitive level, played to the pro level. And so all my life I identified myself as an athlete. And when I was 21 years old, I suffered my 11th concussion. And I suffered from brutal post-concussion symptoms for the better part of probably 6 months. And at the exact same time, or when I was going through this, my mother, who raised me as a single parent, passed away at the age of 46. So I was left basically with a house with a mortgage on it, 21 years old. I had a younger brother who was 16 years old, a father who was virtually out of the picture. So I was trying to raise a child, go to university, be an athlete, and make a living all at the same time. And I quit hockey. I couldn't take it anymore, and it was the only thing that I knew. It was what I kind of ate and slept and drank, and I was an athlete through and through for my entire life. So all of a sudden, this thing that I identified myself as was then removed from my life, and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do with it. One thing that I had always promised myself was that I was going to do something that I enjoyed doing. I saw my mother work in a job that she hated for the better part of her adult life, and I always thought that was so tragic, and I thought, what do I want to do next? So if I couldn't be a professional athlete, I decided I was going to be a rock star. So I played a lot of...
Of course, that's the natural.
It's a natural evolution.
Yeah.
I was also working as a personal trainer at the time, and but I started playing in some serious bands. I play a whole bunch of instruments, and then surprisingly made a bit of a living doing that somehow. And then I had a kid, and then that ruined my dream of becoming a rock star. But so when I came to this kind of crossroad where I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and I was already, as I mentioned, working as a private trainer. I was managing a good life at the time, and I knew I didn't want to continue to do that. I knew that I wanted to work for myself. So at the age of 24, my partner and I, my business partner at the time, and I opened our own gym in Oakville, and it was, I don't know how to this day we made it work, because we were so inept at the business side of things. We were really good at the training side of things, but we were, in terms of our business mindset, it was non-existent. So we started off in this little warehouse space with literally washrooms that we had to rent and bring in on a trailer, and we started with probably 30 clients that came with us from Good Life. And then it just started to grow and grow. And so we knew we were doing something right. We didn't know what it was, but we figured it had to be the training because we weren't doing really anything else. And then over a short period of time, my job kind of morphed into what I now just call a coach. I have been fortunate enough to have privately trained a lot of different people from a lot of different professional walks of life. I've trained multiple NHL athletes, Major League Baseball players, CFL athletes, as well as a lot of members of our Canadian Armed Forces, SWAT team, cops, firefighters, and...
Just like us.
Yeah, no, but my point is that it's really interesting that, somebody who kind of their decisions and their health and wellness, not only physical health, but also mental health. You take somebody like one gentleman that I trained he still works today. He's a Special Forces soldier in the Canadian Armed Forces. I know nothing about his world, but I was forced to try and dive into it as much as I possibly could to learn about what he went through on a daily basis. And we would have private conversations regularly because it was my job to make sure he was as healthy physically and mentally as he possibly could be in his performance. Now, different set of circumstances, but no more difficult than working with the new mother. who just had her first child and is suffering from postpartum depression, and a husband who works all the time and is absent from the home, for example. Same feelings, same mental health issues that these people were dealing with, just a drastically different set of circumstances. And going through and building this business, I suffered in a workout a back injury that I'd fractured my L4, L5 vertebrae, which are two vertebrae in your lower back. When I was a hockey player, I got cross-checked into the boards and went through a horrific recovery process, and then I suffered another back injury to the same area. When I was about 25 years old, I, at the time, had not dealt, I don't think, properly with the grief of the loss of my mother, with the circumstances that I was put in. I just kind of put blinders on, went full speed ahead and tried to move past it. So for some reason, at this point in my life where my business was actually quite successful, I suffered this injury. I was not as mentally healthy as I should have been, didn't realize this at the time, but then became addicted to opiate medication that I was put on, and was addicted and suffered from pretty brutal addiction issues for a long period of time. I was, I guess what you would term a functioning addict. I hate that term, but you could coin it as that. I still ran a successful business until I didn't. But it got to the point where drugs, my own mental health issues, and everything that I had not dealt with in my past, which was still present every single day of my life, started to dictate my behavior, started to dictate my performance. It dictated my ability to be a functioning father, a present husband, and I was never abusive, for example, but I was absent from virtually everything I was doing. And I bring this up, and I don't talk about this very often when we're talking, but I think you guys probably deal with similar issues with maybe not yourselves, but with other people that you are representing or you are leading. So I went through a pretty horrific struggle getting essentially clean from opiate medication, which nobody, I don't think, can ever prepare you for the level of dependency that comes with abuse like that. And then I was forced to start having to rebuild every avenue of my life, essentially, professionally, maritally, even as a parent. It was almost like I was relearning how to be a proper parent again, because I've been so focused and selfish on my own needs and goals for so long that it was basically learning to live again. And then I started suffering from brutal panic attacks. To the point where I drove myself to the hospital twice because I thought I was dying. I literally did. I didn't understand what panic or anxiety was. And weirdly enough, I coached a lot of people, and quite successfully, through their anxiety issues, their depression issues, and their panic issues, but I'd never actually experienced any of it myself. So that was me asking for help from other people when I was in a situation where other people were also constantly asking help of me, was a very interesting, it was a predicament for me, and I didn't know how to handle it. And so I started doing a lot of research and studying a lot on current mental health issues, mainly anxiety, depression. And what I realized is, and I've now talked to just hundreds of people in a private environment that suffer from these issues. And I am not a neuroscientist, I'm far from it, but I do, I think, have a really good understanding at the personal level of what other people go through, because I'm fortunate, I'm blessed enough to be sitting in a one-on-one environment with people who often are telling you their most private, most intimate, most difficult components of their life. And I can relate to them now, where before I couldn't. And so one of the things that I realized was that most people don't understand at all why we do feel anxious and why we get worried and what is the difference between them. And so I'll just talk for a minute on that, and if you have any questions, by all means ask. But we worry a lot as people, right? And to me, there is no distinction between worry, between anxiety, and between fear, right? we're never not anxious about something we worry about. It's very rare that you could worry, if not impossible, that you could worry about something in your life and not be incredibly anxious about it, right? But anxiety is fear. We're never anxious about something that we are not afraid of, right? And what I think is important as human beings to understand is we've evolved from animals, and not that long ago, and I know this is going to sound like I'm getting way off track, but I'm not. If you take a look at a rabbit, for example, and you take a look at the anxieties that rabbit has in his life or her life, right? What are they? They're probably being attacked by a wolf or something like that, something that we can't relate to, right? But what happens in the body, and has anyone in here experienced, you don't have to go into details, but has anybody experienced anxiety attacks or panic attacks or suffered from panic attacks before? Yeah? Yeah? They're debilitating, they're horrible. You feel like you're dying and you don't know what to do with it. And what is essentially happening in the body neurologically is there's a little part of the brain that's responsible for your fight or flight response, right? So you take that example of the rabbit, and what's going to happen when that rabbit sees the wolf is that all of a sudden his heart rate's going to increase, his lung capacity is going to expand, his blood vessels in the body are going to dilate in order to focus on the threat at hand and be able to either flee from it or fight it. It's that innate, right? It's that basic. And we are no different in our response to fear, to stress, to worry, to anxiety than that animal is. The difference is that today we have a whole different set of anxieties and things that we worry about that we are not neurologically equipped to deal with, right? So as human beings, for example, even 3,000 years ago, which sounds like a really long time ago, but through in the course of evolution is nothing. It's a blip. We haven't evolved very much from our ancestors neurologically. So, if we look at the rabbit, then we look at a human 3,000 years ago, what were their anxieties and worry? Right? It was probably being attacked by an animal, just like that rabbit, right? Or the weather, something that we don't worry about anymore. But 3,000 years ago, you absolutely would, right? Nowadays, all of our worries and stresses and fears revolve around really bizarre things, if you think about it, right? Like, I'm tied up in a 30-year mortgage. How the hell do I get out of this thing? What's my next move forward? My mortgage is going to be up for renewal in 2 years. How do I get a better rate because I'm with a B lender and I'm paying, 8%, something like whatever it is, right? Or did I put enough money aside to pay for my income taxes? Huge stress or worry. Or, God forbid you're in a marriage or a relationship where you're worried about what that other person is doing. Those are things that we are not neurologically equipped to know how to deal with. So we manage it as best we can, and without help, it can be overwhelming, right? We don't possess the natural tools to combat that type of stress and anxiety. We combat the natural tools we have the natural tools to combat things like weather, finding shelter, finding food, taking care of our family. But it's so complex what we deal with. And so when you hear other people that are talking about these things, and you understand what is, neurologically and physically happening in the body, it makes you realize that no matter what their anxiety or worry is, that it's very real to them, right? Whatever their stress is, whatever their anxiety is, it is so real to them that it is affecting their performance in their life. It's probably affecting the relationships that they have with other people. And it's going to affect, for sure, their professional performance at work, right? And thankfully nowadays we have a lot of programs and good companies, and I know a little bit about yours, not enough, but they have support systems now in place where if you do need to take a leave for mental health reasons, it's there. But what do we do about it on a personal or a private level, right? So the typical solutions for this type of thing are medication or modern pharmacology, which has its place, but nobody wants to be on medication their entire life, right? Particularly something that in most cases is slightly mood altering, makes you tired, probably makes you gain weight or retain weight at the very least, right? Then we have therapy, which is great. It's another form, it's another way that we can combat those issues that we're feeling. But there's also things that we want to speak on today, like diet, proper nutrition, proper sleep patterns, and proper exercise regimes. And it doesn't have to be rigorous, it's just making small little adjustments in your life to affect your mental health or your performance at every single thing you do. I haven't had a panic attack now in probably 8 years, I would say, but it took a hell of a lot of work to get there. One of the things, and I'm going to let Brandon speak on this a little bit and tell his story, but one of the things that helped me more than anything was reconnecting to things in my life that I had become disconnected from as a result of addiction or anxiety and depression and isolation, because that was what I was most guilty of at a time when I was in a profession that was I was supposed to be this very outgoing human being all the time. I would have to show up to work and you were constantly on, right? There were times where you had to be very empathetic and compassionate, but then you'd have to flick that switch and you'd have to be very aggressive when you were on the floor with some of these athletes or these, men and women who were in roles in their life or professions that were fairly high stakes. So you couldn't treat them the same way. It was almost like you were morphing from one person to another, and all the while I didn't even know how to be myself. So when you look at a lot of scientific research nowadays, it's a bit skewed, but it will almost universally say that the best way to combat anxiety or depression in your everyday life is a combination of modern pharmacology or medication and therapy, right? But what those studies fail to represent is that often people are not investigating or trying the rest of that puzzle, right? So you have things like proper sleep, proper connection to community and friends, nutrition, huge, and exercise, huge. But the people who say that they were positively affected by medications rarely explore the other avenues, right? They rarely change their diet or take up a new exercise regime or hobby. It's just doesn't, when we say exercise too, it doesn't have to be rigorous fitness. It doesn't have to be what this maniac beside me does. But it does have to be something where you are physically active. The reason why physical activity is so beneficial when it comes to combating your own personal stress or anxiety goes back to that example of the rabbit that we were talking about, the fight or flight response that happens automatically in a little spot in the brain called the amygdala, right? And so when we are stressed and anxious, we have a choice. We can either fight or we can flee, and it's that primitive, right? So exercise basically represents for all of us and acts, and our body reacts to it the same way we would to a fight. That is essentially your fight in dealing with your stress and anxiety without the emotional connection, right? So we get to remove the emotional response, your emotional connection to that stress, to that worry, to whatever's going on in our life, and we can have that fight with it. Does that make sense? Right? So it can be immensely beneficial. Now, one of the things that, and I'm going to let Brandon take over for a minute, but is setting little goals for yourself in your life, in your private life. This is not professional we're talking about. You guys are, well equipped to deal with that, I'm sure. But in your private life, what can we do to set little attainable goals to make us constantly feel a little bit more and more and more fulfilled?
I get 1 minute. Time me. 60 seconds to
Kicking
go.
you under the table.
Oh, is that me kicking you? Oh, sorry. Oh, that's good. I'll tell you a little bit my journey. So I'm way younger than Matt, so you guys know that. A few years. But yeah, so I graduated from the University of Toronto. I played football there and I wrestled there. That was kind of how I spent most of my time. Eventually, I finally found a program that I thought I would enjoy. It's professional writing and communications, and I had a good time with it. I could balance my sport and I could get an education, right? So I transferred a couple times. I was one of those kids that just went to school to play football, and then finally I was like, oh, I should probably get some sort of degree, and finally stuck with somewhere, and with my parents' money, I kind of owed it to them to stay there. So I graduated, which was great, and I had a great time in school, and then you get into this little period where you're like, what now, right? Which was probably, I don't know, if maybe you guys right out of the school, you knew exactly what you wanted to do. Probably not, right? the majority of people, it's like 70% of people don't go into the program they actually studied. So they get into life and they're like, okay, like I know I need to get a job, but what does that job look like? What's gonna make me fulfilled or exciting? It's usually not even those questions we ask ourselves. It's like, what's gonna get me successful? What's gonna get me money? What's gonna get me the house, the spouse, and all that stuff, right? And we usually go towards that. I knew I was gonna be a very difficult situation because I hated working for people, and I'm very independent and very structured into what I like to do. And so I need to find things that allow me for that balance. And I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur of some sort, but I didn't really have a product to give out, right? And that's a problem. If I want to be an entrepreneur, I need something to sell, whether it's a service, a brand, or something. And I found this direct marketing company, which was a commission-based job. So it was going to be me standing at a gas station, and I was going to sell cans of wax to cars. So I'd walk up to people, like, literally doing their gas, and I'd be like, hey, how's it going? And then start spraying their car and show them how it works.
One
right?
of those guys. Right?
One of those guys, right?
In Toronto, they call those squeegee kids.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was homeless. Sorry, that's the right term. I was homeless for this week. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna give this a go, right? And you get like sold this a big idea. Like in 10 to 12 months, you could run your own company. Okay, you could be the guy who runs this whole thing. It's just very difficult. It's like a 1% chance that that's gonna be it because the job kind of sucks and it's commission based. So a lot of people want money, and there's a lot of chance you don't make money. So I remember my first week I was there, and I got my ass kicked out in the field, and it sucked. I made like $9 my first paycheck. I was like, what is going on here, right? University of Toronto grad, and I'm making $9 at a gas station. So I'm like, this isn't adding up. But I eventually got pretty good at it. I used the principle, success leaves clues, and I just found the best guy in the company, and I just copied and stealed and cheated from him, right? And I learned from him, and I got pretty good at what I did, right? And then just, you get comfortable the more you do, and I got to take a whole bunch of no's every single day. But I got enough yeses to make me money and make me a fairly competent person at this job. Fast forward 12 months, I'm now the guy in the job, and I have a big team under me, and I just fast forward through
The wax guy.
The wax guy, and we actually switched, and I did a whole bunch of different stuff. I went to makeup. I started selling cosmetics on the street, and this is how crazy it was. It was a bag of 4 makeup products in a little like pink or purple bag that I'd walk up and down the street with, walk into businesses. Like if I was working right now, I would have walked into this room and thrown bags at all of you guys. And I had a little debit machine, and I'd literally just be like, hey guys, you guys like makeup? And you'd be like, yeah, I do. And I was like, great. And then I'd just be like, I don't know what's in there, but check it out. And we would have a conversation, and we would just
I don't know
shoot.
what's in there,
we
but
would,
open it.
But open it. And we'd shoot the shit, and usually people would be like, I'll buy 1 or 2. And I'm like, okay, cool, right? And you get a whole bunch of no's. Like I haven't tell them what, I get some no's, right? Some hard ones. But it was great because that job allowed me, because training people that were new into the job, it was a lot of mentality. You're going to be taking maybe 100 no's today. And this is like straight no's to the face, like get the hell out of my face no's. And then you have to have a positive attitude. You might not make money. So I had to talk about the idea of sacrificing time now for the payout down the road. So it was a great opportunity for me to, every single morning, get in front of a group of 15, 20 young, ambitious people and talk about the basic principles that can actually put immediate gratification on the backside and think about long-term fulfillment and satisfaction. So it was great because it allowed me to speak, it allowed me to educate myself and become more of a theorist and a practitioner. After that, I opened the business up in BC. I had a company out there for a cup of coffee for like 3 or 4 months. I thought it'd be cool to go out to BC. Didn't really love running the business because there was all this like inventory and I'd go on calls and I was like, whoa, I don't want to do that. So I shut that down. And I was like, all right, man, I want to get the health and wellness industry. So that was when I transitioned over to Good Life. And I think that's kind of like the staple of the fitness industry. It's like, all right, go to Good Life at one point.
It's a rite of passage.
It is. And so I was there for a little bit. And coming from a commission-based job like that, if you're good at what I did, you're going to be basically good anywhere in sales because, again, it's probably the hardest form of sales is going in there kind of cold calling with a debit machine that no one really knows who you are and you get sales. So if you can do that, you can probably sell a legitimate, big company or something like that. So I did really well at Good Life for the first year, and I was top of sales in the region. And then I remember just enjoying the job, and there's always a little bit of a glass ceiling to that role. I knew I didn't want to get into management. I tried that game before, and I didn't want to manage people. I like inspiring people. I didn't want to manage a whole bunch of people, right? Especially if high school kids at the front desk and stuff, like that's not my game. So I ended up thinking about, well, how do I create the absolute best life possible for myself? And I had to ask these questions, and these are deep questions that a lot of us don't really ask ourselves. We kind of get into a situation where like, well, I have a family, I have a house, I have kids, and life is pretty good, right? I'm not a pretty good kind of guy. I really look for like, how can I live like my optimal dream life if it's out there? If someone else that I look up to is doing it, like how can I become that person here? And so I asked myself, I want to travel, I want to do like really crazy adventures, I'd love to get paid to work out and experience new adventures, I want to write about it, and I want to speak about it and get in front of teams like this, organizations. And I had this blueprint of what this would look like. So I was like, well, I need to become kind of like, I need to earn a master's degree in this. If I wanted to get the credibility, I need to do something, I guess, like notable enough for me to earn my master's degree. And a lot of us go to school and we earn a master's degree, where I said, well, I'm going to do this like 365-day challenge, and I'm going to earn my master's degree in consistency and grit and discomfort and fulfillment. I really believe that if challenging yourself mentally and physically every single day would lead you to fulfillment, because fulfillment equals growth and happiness equals excitement, right? So if you could have growth and excitement, you're going to live a pretty fulfilling, happy, rewarding, enriching life. So I took on this year-long challenge where every month I would choose a new physical and mental challenge, stuff I wasn't very accustomed to. So I'm more of a strength and athlete, more fast twitch oriented with football and wrestling. And I signed up for I literally Googled world's toughest challenges. I needed to do something that people would be like, oh shit, this dude's serious,
one.
right?
Yeah,
Step
Step
one.
one.
So I literally, but I literally Googled world toughest challenges. A whole bunch of endurance races came on, day long, 24-hour, 200-mile runs. I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna sign up a whole bunch of these this year. And I did this, and I did yoga, and I did kickboxing, and I did jiu-jitsu, but I do it every day of that month, and I would show the growth pattern, because it's cool when you go into a pool the first day and you can barely swim 50 meters, and all of a sudden you're doing a half Ironman 3 months later, all because you were consistent behind something, and you just let yourself actually grow into that person. So I did this whole year-long challenge, a whole bunch of different challenges, and it was awesome because it allowed me to really experience that aspect of chasing or pursuing, I don't like the word chasing, but pursuing something that I was really passionate about. And within that year, I was still at Good Life, I was still working my job, and I broke some company records there. So I was like, okay man, so the average, just kind of give it in a little bit of perspective, personal training was sold at a 20% mark per club, and that was hey, you guys passed with 20%. I was selling 70 to 75% personal training. The reason being is I would sit down with people like anyone here, one-on-one, and we would talk about your goals. But it wasn't just fitness related. I wanted to actually learn about how you guys could live more fulfilling, exciting lives. So I'd have conversations just like this, and I'd tell them about my story, and I'd ask them what are you passionate about? What are you excited about? How can your life become more rewarding outside of just, well, I'm in shape? Because that's fleeting, right? We all know fulfillment, it doesn't just come with a good body or good health. It comes from working a job that we love. You guys have that, that's phenomenal. But it's also having a great personal life, it's having great connections, it's emotionally stable, it's mentally stable, it's having the physical attributes that we want and the health that we want, and financially. So it comes in a whole bunch of different realms that I really wanted to tie into it. And it was a great experience, because I got to really throw myself into a lot of tough challenges, some of which I failed, right? I did a 240-mile run, which was going to take me 4 days to do. It was just literally 4 days of consecutive running. You might get 90 minutes of sleep here and there, you pick your points. But that was on 6 months of kind of training, which is so not the right approach on that kind of race. That's a 5-year graduate level race. But you throw yourself in it and you learn a lot. So I never look at these things as failures, because when you learn something from them, you become better and stronger and more efficient in whatever aspect of life. That's a win for yourself. And it was cool because this year I got to do something also neat. It was called Canada's Strongest, or it was Canada's First Triathlete, which was neat. It was a really awesome experience. There's some guy in Great Britain, he did a triathlon. So it was an Olympic distance triathlon. So if you don't know what that is, it's a 40K bike ride, 10-kilometer run, and it's a 1-mile swim. And he did it with a tree on his back because he did it for charity. And I was like, well, he did it in Great Britain, so I was like, I'll be the first person in Canada to do this. And I took on this challenge, and it was great. We got a lot of exposure for it. We raised some good money for charity. And it just showed, the mindset of, why not me? Why can't I be this person? And to see within 6 weeks so much come to fruition. I had this guy help me out, and I had a lot of support behind me. And it was really cool just to kind of see everything I was talking about a year ago kind of start coming into fruition, just because I was following that passion. And with that, I kind of want to get into a few things mindset-wise that get in the way of us actually pursuing things that are going to make us feel like our life is truly full and complete and enriched. Because, like I said, it's so easy to settle without knowing that we're actually settling. You know what I mean? So we kind of get into this daily pattern where we're just doing the same thing, and we kind of forget to live life. And that's one thing that I really want to hone in on here, because there's just certain principles that get in the way of that. One is ego. It is putting your ego aside and realizing we put so much value on what other people think of our situation. Me, with the, working the gas station job. If I cared one iota what other university grads thought about me working at a gas station, like I never would have taken that journey. 'Cause I would have been like, screw that, like I need to go work like in an office somewhere so people don't think I'm this gas station kid. Like I didn't care what they thought, like I was trying to run a business, I was trying to like own a company, I wasn't working at a gas station. But a lot of us, we value the opinions of people that we don't actually even care about. We probably have like 3 or 4 people that we actually care about their opinions, yet we want to get out there and we want to show more money to people or more expensive car or expensive home rather than being internally fulfilled. So we search external validation rather than being internally fulfilled. And that's something that we need to switch perspective on. And again, pursue things that really make us happy and say like screw everybody else and what they think. Like I don't care if someone thinks I'm going down a stupid path or I'm on a wrong path. I'm like, they don't know me. So why should that bother me? And if you're so self-confident where like, well, I'm pursuing the things I want to do, it shouldn't matter what you do in life at all. Fail. Look for opportunities to fail. And if you do fail, that doesn't label you. Don't worry about failing. It's a good thing to fail because it allows you to redeem yourself. And that redemption is going to be very satisfying. Like I said a couple weeks ago, I did a 120-mile race out in BC. And 60 miles in, it was like 22 hours into the race. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it was a very weird mindset because I'm not that guy. And I was just like, yeah, I'm super content with like, I'm not having fun with this. I'm not that hurt right now, but I just don't want to do it anymore. And I dropped out of the race. And I was like, I'm going to go crew with the rest of my guys and help them out. Then you have a couple days to sit on it, and you have some...
And it ate your brain alive
It ate my
for 7 days after.
And yeah, I was so content in that moment. And then like 2 days later, I'm on the airplane, and then I'm thinking. And I get home. That Monday was like trying to get to bed, and I was just writing shit down. I'm like, yo, like this is not cool. I gotta figure this out. And more for myself, because I had friends messaging me, and like some friends really look up to me, and they're like, hey man, like I was super disappointed that you dropped out because they put me on this pedestal. But I was okay. I was like, well, that's a decision I made that I'm okay with, but at the same time, I don't think I was being fair to myself. So like 3 weeks later, I signed up for another 100-mile race, and I was like, okay man, let's put the pressure back on myself and let's figure this out. And I wrote a blog saying like, it's okay if you fail, but to make sure you don't ever use that excuse again. That's the important part. If you do fail at something, that's totally cool. But if I keep going to different avenues and keep failing with that same excuse, then we're just really weak-minded and we're not actually rectifying the problem. So fail, but rectify that issue. Programming, super important, guys. The content we consume and the environments we hang out in are so critical. Does anyone here have like a morning routine where they listen to the news? CNN, Fox, anything like that? Yeah. Be honest. And again, my dad's like a fan.
Fox.
Does City Line count?
Yeah, City Line, whatever. But a lot of us, we don't understand or we don't actually realize how powerful media and the things that go in our mind are for us. And that can be like listening to music. We listen to these like little like segments on the morning news or radio station. There's some bullshit stuff, and you're kind of like, okay, like it's not doing you any harm, you don't think, but realistically you're not making yourself more motivated or inspired to take on a life that you want to live. And it's a very fine line, but the way I look at it, we have an opportunity every single morning or night to either program ourselves to be super motivated and jacked up for an exciting day, or to program ourselves in a way to be like, today's just going to be another day. And I think we have that opportunity that we should really value that and set ourselves up for that success. And then create your own struggle. I'm a massive advocate of this too. Like Matt was saying, like the biological need, we typically went back in the day, like we'd flee from threats. That was a struggle, right? We would find food, and we would obviously find shelter, and we'd create food. So we almost had our own stimulation that we were expending energy with our day-to-day life. Nowadays, we don't have that need, right? We have a shelter, we're warm, we have food that can be conveniently delivered to us at a drop of a hat. So we don't have that stimulation, so we almost create stimulation with bullshit, right? We pick fights with people, and we look for ways to expend our energy in useless ways, and we get pissed off at traffic, and we're just irritated and frustrated, and we blow out at people when we really shouldn't. Where I look at it, I want to go out and create my own struggle day to day, whether that's going for a hike or running up hills. That's a struggle. Doing a hot yoga session, that's a struggle. If you do these things day to day, you've now created ways to actually externally and internally get rid of and stimulate yourself, right? So if we look for ways to stimulate ourselves like that every single day, we're not looking for little meaningless arguments to have, and we might not think we're actually doing it, but humans were biologically ingrained to find stimulation. If we don't create it ourselves, we'll look for bullshit, and we'll create it through relationships, through business, through work, and that's where a lot of trouble happens. And I always leave it off on be your own superhero, which I absolutely love, and that's something that I pursue myself every single day. And I know it sounds kind of corny, like be your own superhero, but we always look for other people for motivation and inspiration. And that's great to do. I still do that. I still have people that I look up to that give me ideas that will jack me up to pursue new, crazy tasks and challenges. But deep down, you want to be the person that you look at and be like, hey, I admire who I am. I'm proud of the person I am, and that's enough for me to live a fulfilling life and lead others, right? So that way, we've created a whole bunch of leverage to keep going back onto ourselves, to be, admired and inspired and passionate about the life we're living, rather than looking for these external, people or sources of inspiration to get us through the day. When you're happy with who you are and you're actually proud of the person that you're delivering every single day, there's not a lot that's going to stop you, because you can always just take a couple deep breaths and be like, hey, I'm proud of who I am, I admire who I am, I'm my own superhero, we can get through this shit. Cool?
So your goal is to sign up for an ultra marathon in the next 7 days. No, but honestly, how many people in here have something that they have thought about for years, maybe, that you have said, I want to do this, could be a bucket list item that you could have done but didn't, right? I'm sure every one of us has something, right? Somebody be brave enough to just say what it is. What's one thing? We asked this
It doesn't
question
be
to a group
physical, it
the
can
other
be
day.
like anything. It can be.
We asked this question to a group the other day, for example, and one person said dive the barrier reef. Another person said that they'd always wanted to be a stand-up comedian, but had never taken the stage, right? I thought that was a great answer. It was a really cool answer. I'd never heard somebody say that. But, I mean, I have those things, Brandon has those things, but what, does anybody have something that they said, I've always wanted to do this, and you haven't done it?
Come on, guys, we all got
I've
something.
always wanted to like
Get married?
No,
Or yes, that.
no, but I've always wanted to have a piece of art in like a gallery showing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've always really wanted to do that.
I could totally
You could
do that.
totally do that. I
You're
know, but I
doing
just
that this year.
haven't tried, or
We'll
I
be
made
your marketing
So what has-
Be your muse.
Right, and so that was that was exactly what I was hoping you would say, but what has
Oh, sorry.
prevented you from doing that? What are some of the reasons why you don't think that is happening?
I make up excuses that I'm like too busy, I don't have enough time, it takes too much time, I'm not good enough. It's a lot of work to have to like apply to go into a gallery, so when I'm busy with other things in my life, so
Yeah,
just make up a lot of excuses.
yeah,
Yeah.
and somebody else, give us one here.
Similar,
I have a
but
19.
photography.
Photography, okay, awesome. And what has prevented you from doing
The
that?
same things, right? Like earlier we talked about self-narrative,
Yeah.
right? Your ego gets in the way, you're like, my photos aren't gonna be good enough, I gotta learn all this new technology, I don't have enough time. And again, right, getting your work out there and being criticized.
Yeah. 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 In my experience, and there's certain authors, there's neuroscientists that categorize these differently. For me, there are essentially, the reason why we don't do the things that we want to do, or that we tell ourselves we want to do, is because in some way at the root of it, we're afraid of a consequence, right? And you can categorize those consequences, and it often, by doing so, makes it easier to overcome those fears, right? So the typical fears that prevent us from being who we can be are fear of injury or death, right, is a big one. We always look at things like, I mean, for him, for example, he ran a race that, one of the first conversations I ever had with him, he was telling me about this race that he ran last year called the Canadian Death Race, right? Just sounds ominous, the name, but it was
A lot of deaths that year.
It was but it was a 125 kilometer race through a fairly high altitude passage of the Rockies, right? And so that's a pretty crazy thing to do. Now, fear of injury, fear of death, that might be extreme in that environment, but is a real thing, and that would prevent a lot of people from doing that. One of the most common answers I get to this question would probably be one that's easy to guess. I hear all the time, I've always wanted to go skydiving. That's one of the most common answers I get when I ask this question. I always wanted to go skydiving. There's usually someone in the room that hasn't gone skydiving and wants to, or they wanted to do scuba diving or something and hadn't. And the only reason you get when you ask them, why haven't you gone skydiving then, is, well, I don't want to die, or I don't want to get hurt, or I have kids and I don't want to leave them. And when you actually look at the percentage of, I've never gone skydiving, but the likelihood of injury or death from a skydiving experience is literally nil. Like the likelihood of that happening is next to none, but we all associate that as something that could hurt us or injure us or kill us, right? So that's number one. Number two is a big one for most people, is fear of financial repercussion or damage, right? So that's something that we constantly fear. So for example, and I'm sure this isn't your story, but for example, you could have somebody who said, I've always wanted to be a photographer. Okay, well, why haven't you become a photographer? Well, I have a good job. I have a good job, and I have a family. I have a husband and kids that rely on me. My work pays the bills, and don't tell Sloan I'm trying to get you to go be a photographer.
We're all leaving.
But yeah,
Are you quitting
pursuing
today?
my dreams. But it's a real thing, right? It's a real thing. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where we all have those insecurities, and finances are a massive part of our day-to-day stress, right? Fear of failure. Brandon touched on it earlier. Huge for people. Most people are so afraid to fail. They don't realize they're afraid to fail, but they're so afraid to fail that they won't even attempt things that would greatly benefit them. Perfect example that I deal with every single day, dieting, right? How many people in here have tried a diet that didn't work?
We've all done
Right?
it.
Everybody. I have. You know, like everybody. Everybody. Probably multiple times.
Yesterday.
And so when somebody sits in front of you and goes, this is what you should eat for 30, you go, I'm not even gonna try it. I've been there. I've done, this is just me. You know, whatever package this is me. Right? But perfect example of not trying something because you're afraid to fail at it. Right? Keaton brought up having a piece in a gallery. Right? And I would imagine that at some point that had entered your mind, that I'm afraid to fail at this. Whether you were cognizant of it, whether you're aware of it or not, right? That fear is present. And so the last one, kind of similar, but you can separate them, is fear of judgment, right? So we're constantly worried about being judged by other people, right? To the point where a lot of us live our lives so ridiculously that and you don't even realize or contemplate how crazy some of the decisions that you make in your everyday life are. You know, like I know that I do this too, my wife does it all the time, but like, you know, you take somebody who might make a good living, they live paycheck to paycheck like most people, but they pay their bills, and then one summer they drop like 15 grand on landscaping on their front lawn, and they put themselves into a financial disadvantage, essentially, where now their stress levels have gone through the roof because they're worried about paying their taxes, paying their bills, paying for their kids' soccer or their, you know, child's university tuition or whatever it is. And in reality, we've spent the last, 3 months suffering because we made a decision to purchase a service or a product to make our front lawn look a little better. To impress who? Probably people that we don't give a shit about, right? Like, you're doing it for your neighbor or for the guy down the road who has a nice car, so you want the nice car. And I understand why we do it.
And if you do like that stuff and you have the income to do that and the resources, like, be my guest.
Right.
Do that.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know you're not.
What I'm saying is that we constantly make those decisions and we're not aware of it, and not very often does somebody actually put that in perspective and say, like, what are you doing? Why does this matter? And I ask myself that question, and I am by no means a master of it. I do dumb shit all the time. You can ask my wife, it's a daily occurrence in our house. But I constantly ask myself, why does this matter? Why is what I'm about to do matter? And just by asking myself that simple question, I make better decisions, right? Like, what is my motivation behind this? And after coming through a really, really dark period in my life, I realized that I never wanted to take a step even back towards that existence, right? Because it happened so fast that I didn't even realize it was taking place until all of a sudden I was in the throes of addiction and depression. So now I make conscious decisions every day to try and make my life a little bit better. So I set myself little attainable goals. You know, like Brandon spoke about how he approaches his goal setting, right? am a little bit more streamlined, and I will set myself little attainable goals, for example, along the way. I still like broad challenges like Brandon has, but I will even take working out, for example. I do it every day. I love to do it, but it has nothing to do with aesthetics. And I mean that. I've never been the guy who wants bigger arms or looks in the mirror and goes, oh, my pecs aren't symmetrical, like a lot of people do, right? I am the guy who just wants to perform better every time I go in there. So I'll set a goal where, by the end of 2019, I want to be able to do 5 pull-ups, whatever that goal is. But that's something that every single day I try and help people with in the gym, because attaining a goal, no matter how small, constantly moves that needle. It really does. It could be in a professional environment like this where you set yourself a deadline. It could be something as simple as that and you hit that deadline. It could be a weight goal where I want to lose 10 pounds by Christmas. But set yourself an attainable one. Not I want to lose 50. I want to have my dream body by Christmas. Right? Ridiculous. It's not going to happen. But you set yourself little tiny attainable goals in every single thing you do.
And one thing going off that, which I heard, which is neat, that we talked about like getting criticism or our ego getting in the way or we're not good enough. And all that boils down to is that we're looking at the result being the, I guess, kind of like the answer. I'm telling you right now, like for the stuff I've done, and that's whether it's professionally, personally, through these challenges, like the result isn't going to be the thing that makes you happy. It's just not, right? There's always going to be the next thing of like, okay, what's next? Because I'll give a great story, I'll paint a picture for you. So we did this Canada's strongest triathlon, Canada's first ever triathlon, and we had a whole bunch of people out there, right? We had Matt, I had a bunch of friends, family, and it was like a 5-hour event. At the end of it, we had news cameras come out, and they videoed it, and they asked me some questions, and it was a great experience. And then what happens at the end of that, right? People go home. Cameras go away. I'm sitting on a bench by myself with a friend with a tree.
Is the tree your friend?
That's a good point. That's our tree.
Were
is
you
my
there
friend.
by yourself, Brandon?
And I remember us sitting there because Wilson, Pennington.
What's the tree's name?
Groot.
Groot.
Yeah. Me and Groot.
Yeah.
So if you paint that picture, like everything's gone. Like no one's gonna we're gonna have the news is gonna be on the news that night, and after that, basically it's like it's over, right? Now if I were to hang my head on being like, well, that's going to make me happy, and the attention that the Canada Strongest Triathlon brings me is going to make me happy. That's fleeting. It's gone that next Monday. So what I had to dial back was like, well, I had to look back at the process, right? The process of the relationships I grew. I had stronger relationships with Matt and Riley and Melissa and whoever I had that came out there. The process of having my family out there, being there, and then having a great barbecue afterwards. The growth within that challenge. So when we look at something like, I'm going to get criticized, or is my work good enough? Who cares?
No, it's not.
I guarantee you the growth and just the process of you doing something that you love, whether it's painting, whether it's taking photographs, whether it's doing cake decorating. My mom loves that. Like, it doesn't matter. It's you doing something that you love is the win. So fuck thinking about like, oh my god, the result is going to make me happy, or I'm going to feel super depressed afterwards if I get the recognition or validation I need. I'm telling you right now, that is fleeting. We see it, Anthony Bourdain and Robin Williams, the guys that have everything in life. You look at their life, they have money, status, fame, they look like they have great relationships and financial security. They kill themselves. It's not the result, guys. It's not being like, this is going to make me happy. When you pursue things day in, day out that are challenging both mentally and physically that you enjoy doing, not because someone else enjoys it, because you enjoy doing it, you're going to get so much gratitude and fulfillment out of that experience. And that's how I look at everything I do, and I'm sure Matt does too. The things that we do day to day, they're just fun to do. And they allow us to grow, and they add excitement in our lives. And those are the wins. So just take that away, because I know that's usually the biggest thing people say is like, Will, am I good enough? Who cares? Just do it. I don't look at if I'm good enough, I just do it, and I guarantee the process is going to be the thing that makes me extremely happy at the end of it.
Let's touch a little bit on just nutrition and diet. How many people in here think they eat a healthy diet? Anybody? Sweet.
Slow.
Yeah, I do. Doesn't come.
What were you doing out there?
Ordering pizza. I eat healthy. I don't eat crap. I just eat really weird things.
No, you eat healthy. Yeah.
I'm forever on a diet.
Yeah.
Put it that way.
You eat
like
healthy.
forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do it in extremes.
Why do you diet? Why do you eat well?
Those are two different questions.
Why do you eat well? Why do you eat?
Because I feel better, first of all. I also think as a parent, I'm trying to set a good example for my child.
Yep.
And fundamentally, because I would like to lose weight all the time, all the time.
And most people,
Yes.
most people do.
Yeah.
So the USC, so the University of Southern California did a study last year where they surveyed, I think it was over 100,000 people, and 93% of people surveyed said that they were unhappy with their aesthetic appearance, right? That's a tragic number, because that affects everything that you do. It affects your performance in the professional world, it affects your performance as a parent, right? And I have been, and I can empathize with anybody that goes through that. I at one point in my life when I was going through really rough periods was probably 45, 50 pounds heavier than I am today. And I was always an athlete all my life, and then all of a sudden I wasn't, and I got really heavy. I didn't care anymore about anything other than my own struggles, my own private struggles, and I got horribly unfit, unhealthy. I gained a lot of weight, and then had to work really, really hard to get it back. When it comes to nutrition though, I think for me, one of the biggest issues with most people is they just don't know what the hell to do, right? Like, what do we eat? You're constantly surrounded by conflicting information. You know, one week, I remember growing up, for example, as an athlete, my parents did what was called carb loading. That was what we were supposed to do. Prior to an event, you're supposed to eat a whole bunch of pasta or bread so you can load your body with carbs to have enough energy to get you through the performance, right? And nowadays, it's the total opposite end of the spectrum, where all you hear is like, don't eat carbs, carbs are the enemy, carbs are so bad. So then all of a sudden, and there's so much in your face information as a result of social media, for example, that you go out and eat a sandwich for lunch, and then half of us sit there and we're dwelling on it as we're eating it. We can't even enjoy the food that we're eating because we're so concerned about what the hell it's going to do to us after. Is this going to make me gain 2 pounds over the weekend because we eat popcorn? I mean, but what do we actually eat? And we asked, everybody in here put up their hand when we said, have you tried a diet that failed, right? And the number, and I can't sit here and give you one diet for everybody in here that'll work. I'd be making millions of dollars somewhere if I had that answer. But what I can tell you is that dieting for every single person is very different. So if you are somebody who has ever struggled with weight or diet or anything in your life that is related to nutrition, even your own health, right? Because the food we eat is literally fundamental to how healthy we will be long term. We can now draw conclusive links to most mental health disorders, to most autoimmune diseases, even to prolonged joint injury, something as simple as that. How long you're affected by the bum knee you got, skating last winter, whatever it is. It all comes back to what we put in our bodies on a daily basis. So the best advice that I can give, and ask any questions that you have on anything related to diet or exercise from us, but the best advice I can give you is eat from the earth as much as you possibly can. And this is nothing groundbreaking, it's nothing new, but it is the only way in today's society that you can eat a healthy diet that will not only change your aesthetic outlook, but also it will affect your mental health, right? There are so many byproducts or chemicals and just shit that are in the food that we eat every single day. And the problem with most of those chemicals, and we'll just take one and isolate it, aspartame, for example. We all know what aspartame is, right? It's an artificial sweetener that's in every diet pop in the world. It's also found in far more products than you would even realize. Aspartame, for example, makes a food basically calorie free. That's why they use it. So companies like Diet Coke can market it as a calorie free alternative to Coca-Cola. And we're looking at aspartame, but this goes for a lot of other additives and preservatives in your food. So what happens when you add that instead of sugar? is your body recognizes aspartame as a toxin, and it can't get rid of it. So where does it store it? It can't store it in vital tissue like organs, so it stores it in what's called the visceral adipose tissue, which is essentially your internal fat lining. So then when your body goes to break that tissue down, it won't, because there is literally a toxin being stored in that tissue, right? So what Diet Coke will never tell you is that by drinking Diet Coke, you are actually doing more damage to your weight management than you would be by drinking a Coke. If you're trying to lose weight, you'd be better off drinking Coca-Cola than Diet Coke, right? And so many chemicals and ingredients in our food are stored in our body like that. They're toxic, and we have to secrete them out of our body some way, and it's usually through the lymphatic system. So then our lymphatic system gets taxed, our hormonal structures, and as women, you guys are far more prone to hormonal imbalances just genetically than men are, obviously, right? So all of a sudden now, because of the food we eat, we're hormonally imbalanced, which affects our cognitive health or our mental well-being, and that in turn is going to affect anything physical that we are able to do, right? The biggest change that most people notice when they start to eat a healthy diet, they cannot even articulate. It's so funny. When you get somebody on a diet, on a proper diet, for a month, sometimes even less time, you'll ask them how they feel, and the most common response I get is like, I just feel awesome. Like, do you have more energy? Yeah, I think so. I don't know, do your joints hurt? Yeah, well, now that you mention it, yeah, my joints feel, my knees feel a lot better. Are you less tired? Yeah, like now that you mention it, on the way home after work, I'm not nodding off at the wheel on the 401. But they don't even realize how much better they can feel on a daily basis by making subtle changes, right? As fitness and health practitioners, you get a lot of people that come. I get a lot of people that come into the gym, for example, or I'll have a private nutritional consultation with the person, and the person's like, I want to lose. Honestly, it happens every day. I want to lose 50 pounds by August because I have a wedding. Okay, cool. Or most common one probably, over Christmas this year, I'm going to the Dominican. I need to look great in a bikini. Like that happens all the time, right? And if you really want to, and you know how to cater a diet for somebody, yeah, I could probably strip 30 pounds off of somebody by Christmas, no problem. I could do that in my sleep at this point if they did every single thing that I told them to do. Yes, could you do it? Are you going to maintain a healthy weight after the vacation? No, not a chance, right? You need something sustainable. Most diets aren't. Anybody in here tried the keto diet? Anybody?
Yeah.
You know what it is? How long, who said yeah? You? How long did you last on it?
A while. Yeah, I don't know, months.
Where you did keto and you felt good? Most people don't.
I mean, it was hard for me because I kind of had pretty much cut dairy out of my diet for like the 3 or 4 years prior to it. So,
Yep.
And there's just a lot of stuff in there that I'm like, wouldn't associate as being healthy.
Mhm.
Just the high fat piece, even though it's
Massively
good
high
fats,
fat, yeah.
right? Like, and you
Yeah.
have to be careful. You can't just sit down and eat like a tub of lard, but
Yeah.
I mean, I love avocados, so that was never a problem. But just things I wouldn't normally have put in my food, I
Yeah.
was just like, oh, I gotta go along with this. So,
Yeah.
but I found actually like the Whole30 diet is far more conducive to.
Yep.
Like it's easier to follow. It's very basic principles. It's kind of the way I ate anyways.
It's a very healthy way to
So,
live.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a great diet. Even the paleo diet has a lot
Yeah,
of success.
very similar.
It's a little bit more lenient than the keto diet, but even with paleo, you can't approach it as this is the way I'm eating. Most people anyway, cannot approach it with I am just paleo now and not eat the foods that you still want to eat. Right? Like for me, you've probably heard of it, but I live by the 80-20 rule. Okay, so for example, you have roughly 21 major meals every week that you eat. Most of us do anyways. I eat a little bit more frequently than that, but snacks for me are never a problem. I usually just gravitate toward healthy snacks. But if I eat 16 or 17 of those meals on point nutritionally, I genuinely don't give a shit what I eat for the other 4. I will eat whatever I want for the other 4. And most people will have a phenomenal amount of dietary success with that because it provides you with the leniency that you still feel good about, you know, being able to have fried chicken or macaroni and cheese or whatever that is, whatever that food is that your own personal comfort food. But if you're eating healthy, you know, 80% of the time, and I'm not even talking calorie counting, just making proper nutritional choices, you will see a massively beneficial result very quickly from it.
And even before that, guys, too, is like just the idea if you schedule and structure out what a day is gonna look like, not like meticulously, like I gotta eat at 10 o'clock and I gotta eat at 12 o'clock, I gotta eat this, just like you have maybe like an eating window and you know what time you're gonna go to bed, and you know when you're gonna wake up, and you know when you're gonna exercise. If you just have that structure laid out, the hormonal regulation that you're gonna do for yourself is incredible. Because most people have all these like hormonal imbalances because they're all over the place. One night they're snacking at 10 p.m. The next night they're like, well, I'm gonna finish eating at 6 p.m. By that point, they have so many cravings going on because their leptin levels aren't actually like, you know, working with them, that all of a sudden like they're super hungry at night and they have to eat something. So if you guys can even just structure out a daily schedule of like, this is kind of what I'm gonna fall under, right? I'm gonna start eating at 8 a.m. I'm gonna stop eating at 7 p.m. I'm gonna sleep at 10 p.m. I'm gonna wake up at 6 a.m. And you make that like a non-negotiable. Which again, when you have that non-negotiable in there, it makes your life a lot easier because then you know, okay, I need to take care of the kids at this time. I need to go to the gym at this time. I need to get home by this time. I need to like stop using my phone by this time. Like we have these little cues now that I'm doing a program with people right now. They're on their 4th week and it's hard. Like I laid all this stuff out for them. It's a case study for me to kind of get information on, see how they're doing with it. And it's just fun to see how like difficult this can be. But if you break it down, maybe your first week, you start off with just like, hey, I'm gonna eat between this hour and this hour. And then next week, I'm gonna go to bed at this time. Slowly but surely, these things become habitual. And over time, then you start regulating your hormones. And it becomes easier because you're not having cravings at night. And all of a sudden, you're not hungry at times that you shouldn't be hungry at. And then the diet can like, we're gonna still throw the diet in what we're talking about, but if you're doing the diet without this crazy, if you're all over the place, you're still eating 10 p.m. and you're up at 4 and you're going to bed at 12, it's going to be hard to lose weight. It's going to be really hard to feel energized and fulfilled when you're all over the place. So like that's probably one of the basic things I'll always tell people right off the bat. Figure out your sleep schedule, figure out your eating schedule, figure out when you're waking up, figure out when you're going to exercise, have these things routinely based out for you guys so your life just becomes easier. It's one less thing for you guys to have to think about. So you're not rushing around your house at night and you're looking for things to eat or not eat, and then you're doing the most convenient thing, which is emotional rather than logical, and that just leads to a storm of bad decisions. So make that schedule innate. Really try to program that self for yourself, and it'll be so much easier for yourself.
I think one of the problems too, and I won't speak on behalf of everyone around the table, but I think there'll probably be some agreement. I mean, obviously for us who spend like a fair bit of time in our cars,
On the road,
on the road, traveling in airports,
Hotels,
in hotels, all of that. I mean, I think you have the best intentions of wanting to. For me, I can go the better part of the day without eating, and then realize I haven't eaten, and then that's when I'll be like, I just ate everything, right? And then like have like a bottle of wine. So.
That's where prep comes in.
Yeah.
Like I'm a massive advocate. Like and it takes time, but that will save you time.
But if
Do
you're
you
on the
guys have any
It's
tips though
hard.
for that?
I
when
get
you're on
that.
the road?
Yeah, so
I
when
get
you're
that.
when you're on the road, so I did a few months ago. I did a bunch of Instagram posts because I had this question actually came up quite a bit, and so what I did was I went around to different fast food restaurants. Like I went to McDonald's, I went to Wendy's, I skipped Burger King because that was a tough one to do. I had Pita Pit. There was I think 7 of them that I did, and my sole intention was to show people that you can walk into McDonald's, not eat an optimal meal, but you can eat a healthy meal, right? So one of the hardest things that we have to do if you want to make some changes in your diet is shut off that part of our brain that, as Brandon said, is driven by emotion. We have emotional connections, whether we know it or not, to a lot of foods that we eat. We go into a restaurant and we see something and go, that's what I want, right? So for me, I still have that, but I go, that's what I want, but that's what I'm gonna have, right? And I know that sounds so simple and silly to say, but you can eat healthy nowadays in virtually any restaurant that you go into. So in McDonald's, for example, I went in, I got them to make me an Angus burger patty, which is essentially the purest beef you can get out of McDonald's. It beats the hell out of like a hamburger patty that they use, right? At least it's real meat. And then I got them to put it in a lettuce wrap, and then I had a side salad. And it was the same price as the regular combo, and I got it with a bottle of water. Now I know that's not a fun meal to eat at McDonald's, but it was good. It was still a burger. It satisfied my craving for a burger that day, right? Wendy's has a whole slew of salads that are decent. If you go into restaurants, the best thing that you can pick is some type of grilled or baked meat with vegetables. And if you want some type of carbohydrate, I am not an anti-carb guy. I eat a ton of them every day. But you have to be aware of where they're coming from, right? The first thing that I do when I help people plan a new diet, because if you ask 10 different dietitians, nutritionists, trainers, they will give you 10 vastly different dietary ideas, right? Everybody's got some idea of why and usually, in all honesty, usually it's some guy who's 23 years old who's just jacked because he was a football player, and he's like, yo, this is what I eat, right? And you're looking at him going like, that's not what I'm gonna eat. You know, like
how long do you guys travel for? Like, what's your travel schedule? You guys, is it like would you fly out, come back that day, the next day?
Sometimes.
4 days, 3 days?
4 days.
Yeah.
I would say
Because,
although we
like,
ate
3
to 4 days.
3 to 4? Okay.
If
So-
you are, but take one thing out at a time, okay? Don't make drastic changes to your diet. The reason why I asked Sloan earlier, or asked the room if anybody had tried the keto diet, is because most people who have tried it failed miserably at it. And maybe Sloan's experience was different, but most people, they fail right away. The reason being, you're removing too much at once for most people to even comprehend. If somebody tells you today, they're like, hey, I can have you down 30 pounds by the end of November, all you gotta do is get rid of dairy, get rid of wheat, limit your carbs, no booze, no coffee, let's go. You're gonna be like, no, not a chance. Because at least 2 of those things, you're like, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting rid of coffee, there's no way. I'm not getting rid of booze on Fridays and Saturdays, like there's no way, right? So take one thing out at a time. Step 1, as an experiment into a new dietary process, remove dairy from your life. Okay? Remove any dairy that you buy at a local grocery store, whether that's milk, whether that's, and I'll say it now because I'm going to get this question, what about Greek yogurt? Nope, it's dairy. Any dairy that you have in your life, if you want to make a very progressive dietary decision, take it out of your diet, especially as women, because it affects your hormonal structure way more than it does men. It will affect your estrogen and progesterone levels, and it's been shown to raise testosterone levels in women. Right, so that hormonal imbalance, awful. It creates inflammation in the body through the dietary or through the digestional process, and it does nothing but harm to us. If you are going out and you are the one who is buying grass-fed organic dairy, it is better. Without a doubt, it's better.
Here's not so maybe a silly question. I
Yeah, no,
really
shoot.
have no idea because I've always drank milk my whole life. But would you recommend is like soy and almond milk and coconut milk and all those things, they can still consider dairy?
They're
Or
not
is that-
considered dairy. No,
Okay,
they'd be a
so-
dairy alternative. Soy
so
milk,
make sure I
though.
still drink my Starbucks.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to do it, though,
Yes.
drink almond milk over soy
Okay.
milk.
Yeah.
So it's bad for-
Soy milk,
Oh.
yeah, soy milk for women is probably
love
just
almond
as
milk.
bad as standard dairy is. Yeah, soy milk is awful for females. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Men tolerate it a lot more, but even for men, soy is not in the volume that you consume in like soy milk and soy replacement products. It's why a lot of people who are vegan, for example, a lot of women who are vegan still suffer from hormonal issues. It's because there's so much soy in vegan meat alternatives.
That's
Right.
true for children too, right? Because
For anybody,
the
yeah.
moment my kids were born, my doctor said stay away from milk. So my kids have never really drank.
For anybody, yeah. Through the digestion, our milk our milk in Canada, for example, is better than the States. It's nowhere near as good as it is in some of the other developed countries of the world. We have pretty shitty quality milk in Canada, right? So even organic milk, it's the same thing. It's grass-fed is better, but still, the way that our body metabolizes dairy, it creates a lot of inflammation in the body. I have seen people, not a word of a lie, who suffered from horrible like joint issues where, you know, they had brutal tennis elbow, for example, something like that, and it's just prolonged and it's consistently a problem in their life. And by removing dairy, it didn't fix the problem, but it alleviated a great deal of the pain. Because it's almost like removing it almost act like you taking an Advil or an anti-inflammatory. Because we consume a lot of dairy on a daily basis, most of us do in this country. Right? The second thing to go would be wheat. I would just take it out if you can. There's so many good gluten-free alternatives, but on that note too, and my wife has celiac disease, so we don't have wheat in our house. It's, you know, it's like arsenic in our kitchen. We can't have it. It can't be on the counters, it can't be anywhere. So 10 years ago, 12 years ago, before gluten-free products are what they are today, we were eating gluten-free products when everything was made out of brown rice flour and just tasted like a sponge, right? But what you need to realize, how many people, does anybody in here eat essentially a gluten-free diet? No?
Sometimes.
Okay, sometimes. What you want to realize when it comes to, in terms of weight management, most gluten-free alternatives, although maybe they might be the healthier option of the two, they're no less damaging to weight management than wheat is, right? So you take a look at a gluten-free, you know, even take a look at like a corn tortilla versus a wheat tortilla, right? Which is a pretty standard replacement nowadays in most restaurants. The carb volume or the carb load is virtually identical. There's no less carbs in the corn tortilla. Yeah, there's no gluten in it, but at the same time, it's just a giant piece of corn, which is a crop in Canada, which is massively overproduced and sprayed with just tons of pesticides and is a bad thing to eat, right? I'm not saying every once in a while don't go for tacos, but every day that you can, eat from the earth as much as possible. If any part of your meal has been processed in any way, it is not ideal. Right, so a tortilla, for example, processed. Even a corn one. Yes, it's mainly corn, but at some point in time, unless you made it yourself in the kitchen from grinding dried corn, somebody had to put additives in there, usually gums or some type of binary agent to press that thing and make it into a tortilla. Right? So when in doubt, eat from the earth. So that would just be simply fruits, vegetables, nuts, eggs, meats, spices, herbs, anything, right? Kind of goes back to what we were saying before, where you're a human that was designed many thousands of years ago, which again sounds like a long time, but we have not evolved enough to be able to tolerate the food that we eat, right? Our bodies were designed to eat whatever we found or whatever we hunted, right? It's kind of the concept behind the paleo diet. I'm a little bit more forgiving or lenient with a lot of my clients because I think there are things that the paleo diet doesn't allow that are beneficial for the body, but eat from the earth as much as you possibly can. Right?
What about, we have to go see Game Changers. The like plant-based diet and sort of plant-based proteins.
Like proteins and stuff?
As opposed to,
There was a really cool study that a guy named Dr. Christian Rodriguez just did recently on specifically protein qualities. And there's a lot of studies, but a lot of these are funded by like research companies that are basically back-ending their own studies. So it's really hard to find adequate representation of what you're looking at. what he found, his was a totally independent study. Now, he called and basically asked for the CODs from every one of these. I think there were 87 different protein manufacturers that he called and asked for the CODs from, and that is just essentially a breakdown of everything that is in that protein. The main problem with a lot of them is heavy metals, which are found in a lot of proteins. Now, particularly in plant-based proteins, just because of the refinement process, there is a massive presence of heavy metals in them, which again, for women, unfortunately, you're affected by it a lot more than men are. So heavy metals are linked to a whole slew of neurological issues, to mental health disorders, and they are very closely linked. It's not, this may happen to 1 in a million. We know that heavy metals are linked to higher rates of autism in our children, higher rates of Alzheimer's disease, higher rates of any autoimmune disease. And so to answer your question, in a lot of plant-based proteins, even though we think we are making a healthier choice, the quality of the protein is not great. The absorption ratio between plant-based and whey-based proteins, for example, is quite a lot lower. A lot of studies have shown that your body just doesn't absorb, synthesize, and use as much of a plant-based protein as it does of a whey protein. Now, that's not to say that they're any less beneficial on that note alone, because you could just take a little bit more of them. But plant-based proteins, I think there is a misconception nowadays that by buying a vegan protein, you are making a healthier choice. And that is not the case. It is absolutely not true. In fact, a lot of the plant-based proteins out there are crap. If anybody is curious, is anybody a vegan? Do we have vegans in here? No?
No, but I buy vegan protein. Is it bad for me? Now I'm like, well, damn it.
If you, I'm gonna send you guys, I'm gonna send Sloan an email that kind of like touches on some of the main points that we have here, and then you guys are more than welcome to contact Brandon and I and ask us any questions that you have. I have a list of the 5 best quality vegan proteins that you can go out and buy. And if you're curious as to which one, and a lot of the big name brands are the worst ones, as you would probably expect. One of the ones that failed the test miserably is one called Isogenics. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Yeah, I have heard of that.
So miserably failed the test, like off the charts in heavy metals. And so that was, and that's one that so many people use as a weight loss tool. And it's gonna help you lose weight if you're only eating 800 calories a day and all you're drinking are protein shakes. You're absolutely gonna lose weight.
We buy it because we don't eat pork, and whey has pork proteins in it, right? So it's got a lot of like pig bone and all of that.
A lot of whey companies nowadays, though, do not. They don't have many additives. So there's one, if you're gonna, and I'm not saying that whey, I use cricket protein. That's what I use, because it's an organic source. It is literally crickets from British Columbia that are caught in the wild and then farmed. And then, they're dried out.
BC crickets, BC butt.
There you go.
We'll
They're dried out, grounded up, and then cacao is added to it. Monk fruit extract is used as the sweetener, and it's a phenomenal protein source. So I'm not a huge whey guy. If you are going with whey proteins, does anybody in here take protein supplementation? So if you are going to go with a whey protein, the best version that you can buy is definitely a whey isolate, first of all, because there's 2 types of whey proteins. There's whey and then there's whey isolate. So, and what all that means is essentially in milk, which whey is derived from. Whey is a dairy source, essentially, right? So whey comes from milk. There's 2 types of protein in milk. There's something called whey, and then there's something called casein. Casein is usually what lactose intolerant people react to. So many people who are lactose can actually tolerate whey. It's not looked at as being modern dairy. So, for example, it is a little bit more inflammatory than some of the vegan proteins, but if you don't have inflammation issues, it's not enough of an inflammatory agent to worry about. But again, might not be the best protein source in the world, but it is an adequate source of protein, and it is a fairly healthy one. So just make sure you're getting a whey isolate, particularly one that was manufactured in New Zealand, because they have probably the highest standard of livestock maintenance on planet Earth.
And one last thing, guys, traveling. I want to go back to traveling for a second, because I like Matt's suggestion. If you're going to go to these fast food restaurants to get a healthy option, unfortunately for me, I hate the idea of willpower. And to go in there when you're having a stressful day and be like, I want to do that one, it can be a bit tricky, right? Your best bet from with my experience with traveling for like 3 or 4 days at a time, that first day I land, I go to a grocery store and I stock up on food. I get healthy, organic options that are gonna last me 3 to 4 days. And usually we have a fridge or something like that in the hotel.
Yeah.
If you have those foods around, you're gonna eat them, right?
Yeah.
When you don't, and you're gonna go downstairs, you're gonna get something fast. You might be in a rush that morning, so you're gonna grab a muffin or a donut or something shitty for yourself, or you're just gonna do coffee and you're not gonna eat for the first 5 hours of the day. Force yourself and force your hand by having this stuff ready for you. That's the best way to make sure you don't have decision fatigue, make sure you're not kind of like overwhelmed with what should I eat, is this the best option, then get to a fast food restaurant, and then it's like, all right, let's have willpower kick in right now. It's a very dangerous game at times, so if you can, the best, I like to hack my environments. I like to eliminate that possibility of positive or negative. My best suggestion, just load up on food for 4 days, have it all there for you, a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, maybe some snacks, trail mix, and you're kind of set up, okay? So if you do that day 1, you're kind of set up for the next 3-4 days. Then if you have to, you're on the road, yeah, then definitely apply Matt's options, because again, it's going to be the next best thing for you.
I think that's a good idea, just even snacks alone too.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I think we're
And guys, stuff
looking
that
for
holds,
something
like,
quick,
Like
easy,
Sloan's saying too, probably
carbo.
like fats are gonna give you energy longer. They're gonna sustain you. They're not gonna go right through your system. Then all of a sudden, like, or you have like a low glycemic carbohydrate's a good one too, right? You have these proteins that are gonna obviously sit with you a little bit longer rather than just you grab a muffin, for example, or a bagel. Those things are gonna go right through you, and all of a sudden, an hour later, you're hungry.
Yeah.
And then you're wondering, like, I just had a bagel, right? So if you have these little snacks that are healthy, that are gonna sustain you for a longer period of time, they'll take you right to dinner. You're good to go.
Do you have like some advice just around, because I like the idea of meal prep
Mhm.
when I can find the time to do it.
Mhm.
And it does help for sure, but then I just get sidetracked with it and whatever. That's just maybe me, but so I don't know. Do you have like any tips? Any advice?
I'll pick a day. Like I'll make it like if you have a day that you're like, it's kind of my reset day where I can, take care of a few things, get the car washed, clean the house, make that your meal prep hour and a half. Like it's gonna be an hour and a half and you're gonna be good to go. Like I can make a quinoa for the whole week within 20 minutes. Right? It's a good quinoa salad, that's my carbohydrate for the week right there. And you might want to have 2 different things because you're not like Brandon who wants to eat the same carbohydrate every single day. But then I'll have my chicken cooking while I'm doing that. Within an hour and a half I have like 3-4 meals made for my week and I'm good to go. And that's something, and I can still, like while I'm doing that, while I'm cooking the chicken, I can still do other stuff in the house. You can still take care of your family and do other things, right? So, because again, to go, say I'm gonna come home every night, I'm gonna meal prep, it's not gonna happen, guys. We're not gonna do it.
No. Who has kids in here?
Yeah, when we have
Yeah.
for our family.
Yeah, so it's brutal, right? I have 3 kids. I have 3 kids, so I can tell you a little bit about like what we do in our house. Because again, my wife is she's an educated holistic nutritionist, and obviously doing what I do, nutrition is a big focus in our house. Our kids, one of the things I pride myself most on is that our kids will literally eat anything. We don't even have one of them that's the least bit picky. And that's because we've exposed them to, I think, the right foods in the right ways throughout their young lives. One of the things that I do, I'm a big advocate of eggs, for example. I get free-range eggs because they are a little bit better. The nutrient value in them is a little bit higher. But one thing that takes me virtually no time at all is every Sunday, I will pan fry in avocado oil like 12 to 18 eggs. And then I have little pieces of tin foil that I let them cool on. I package them up, I put them in the fridge, and then every day for the next 5 days when I go to work, I grab a package out of the fridge that contains 3 eggs, 4 eggs, sometimes for you guys might be 2, right? But I'll throw it in the microwave for 15 seconds and I eat it in the car on the way to work. I literally eat it like you would eat a cookie. It's just a fried egg, they're not greasy because I use very little oil, and that's something that saves me so much time. Another thing that we do, we will go and because we're feeding 5 people, and as my wife says, I eat for 4. But so our food budget, we have to be fairly cognizant of how much money we spend every month on food because we spend a lot on food. My kids are big eaters. I'm a big eater. My wife, for a person her size, is a fairly big eater. So we have our specific, grocery route that we have. I live in Winona, which I'm sure means nothing to a lot of you, but it's basically halfway between Hamilton and Niagara. Okay, so I'm only about 20-25 minutes away from the border, so I do a lot of shopping in the States because you can find really healthy products at a way cheaper price even after the conversion of the dollar than we do in Canada. So that's something that we do as a family, and it's fun. The kids like to do it. We get to cross the border. We take them to some fun park or whatever while we're in the States, and we do it. But then we'll come home and I will pick things like roasts, for example. I will pick things like big pieces. If I'm gonna have steak, for example, I will buy 4 pounds of it, because you can get it at a cheaper cost per pound typically than you can if you're buying individually packaged meat. And I will cook it all, and we will use the other half of that 2 to 3 days later. It keeps, and it's perfectly fine. Like, you do not have to be thawing meat out every morning in your sink so when you get home it's ready to go, because that's really difficult to do. And when you don't have something prepared, that's when you buy crap, right? It really is. So that's what Brandon's idea of putting food in the fridge on the road. Great idea, because you're gonna eat it, and once you eat it, you're full, you're not thinking about making a bad choice. But so we will come home and we will have, steak from 2 nights earlier, but plenty to feed all of us. And then all we have to do is maybe, boil some vegetables or roast something, right? Or I'll just throw vegetables on the grill. And we literally have dinner made in 10 to 12 minutes because we already have the main part of it cooked, right? So we'll cook one day for 2 or 3 days. And if you're somebody who doesn't, and I don't mind, some people do, but if you're somebody who doesn't mind eating the same thing 2 to 3 days in a row, it makes it really easy. Like, we'll buy a big roast, we'll roast it on Sunday, and then for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we're eating a roast. But my wife will get creative with it sometimes, so she'll take the leftover roast and she'll just chop it up and throw it in a stir fry, something like that. So then on day 3, we're having a stir fry, which is just, we do it with sweet potato noodles, just a whole boatload of vegetables and whatever leftover meat we have. And that, it helps immensely. It really does. Like, it helps, I wouldn't eat as healthy as I did if I had to cook for myself every day. If I had to come up with a dinner idea every single day, I can tell you what I would resort to.
It's the travel.
Absolutely.
Like Sunday,
Yeah.
You can bring
I
food. You
cook
can
for
bring
the
food
whole
on the
week.
airport. I've been known to bring like 5 chickens on the airport.
5 chickens.
No, yeah.
5 chickens.
But I would
5 chickens and a tree.
I would do business trips, right, where I was working in New York or Dallas, and I'd bring like 5 hamburgers, 5 chicken breasts, and like that lasted me the week. I didn't want to spend money. I was cheap as shit, and I didn't want to eat like crap. So, and again,
Brandon
like,
brings them on airplanes as personal health animals, and then when he gets to the destination,
Is that your personal
I-
support?
I- I-
animal?
personal support.
I know, one with
It's
the
my personal
five
support
chickens on the
chickens.
way.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, they were tasty.
big bag for that. But again, you can do that. I'm just saying. So don't think like they're gonna look through
You
your
should bring
things.
like apples and protein, but now I would like to bring.
Another
Eggs,
thing
tuna cans,
that
there's so many options.
might help too,
You know what's
which
awesome? Sorry,
Yep.
I totally cut you off. I said sorry, I totally cut you off, because obviously I knew that I was cutting you off.
This is so awesome. Just like, you know what's awesome.
it better be awesome.
Costco has like these meal prep containers that you can buy.
Yep.
They come in like a package of 40 of them.
Oh, cool.
And
Yep,
they're
I see
so
'em.
worth it. Like,
Yeah.
they're like the black, but they're like, and then they have the different
Sections.
sections in them, and they're totally reusable. And they're so worth it. We just like only me when I do prep.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoy cooking, like that would be the other thing that, like, I love doing that, so I get to do that.
If you
but-
do, and that's
Yeah.
part, like, for some people, cooking is their outlet, right? So they love to come home from work and cook because it's their time and they get to be creative. But for a lot of us, like, a lot of people don't like cooking. The last thing they want to do is come home from work at 6:30 p.m. and, have a husband who's sitting on the couch kind of like, what's for dinner? And but it happens, and a lot of men cook nowadays, but a lot of them don't. So unfortunately, in a lot of households, it falls on the mother or the wife, and that's BS, but it does. So when you have a mother of 3, for example, that comes home from work, then takes her kid to soccer, then has to come home or worry about dinner in between that, it's really hard to get something right or get something nutritional for dinner in that period of time. Right? It's awful. You come home at 6 o'clock, you're like, I got up at 7:30, got to feed 4 people before I'm out the door, and then you just scramble and you cook whatever you have to cook.
And that also goes back, like you having that convenient food allows you to do your photography, allows you to paint. Like those are like the things that we're trying to like implement as well, guys. It isn't just about like eating healthy or this, that. It's like so you have more time for yourself, right? When you eliminate that rush around where it's all about, taking care of your kids and all that stuff, have time for yourself, right? And doing this is just one more hack to your environment that allows you to live a more fulfilling life, right?
Before we wrap up, but I was going to say, we eat a lot of turkey in our house too, where, most people don't eat turkey any other day but Christmas, right? but we do all the time. Like, we'll buy a turkey because it's so cheap when it's not Christmas time. Like, you can go and, like, you can always find a grocery store that has it on for like $1.50 a pound or something like that. And then we'll just roast a turkey, which isn't all that much work once you do it a few times. And then we just chop it up, and my wife will literally freeze it already pre-cooked, so that when we come home, like, all she has to do is, or in the morning, she throws it in a crock pot, or at night she'll throw it in the oven, or there's a million different ways you can eat it. But it really, it's a massive help. It's a pretty healthy food. They're usually healthy raised animals. In this part of our province anyway, you can find really good quality turkey at a decent price, and it can provide you with like 9 or 10 meals. You know, like, you might have to take a Sunday afternoon and prep 9 or 10 meals, but we have a secondary freezer that we keep in our garage, and we have just foil pans. So she'll just throw turkey in like a casserole dish with a couple other things, stuff it in the freezer, so that morning she just pulls it out. You have to put it in the oven, you know, at some point through the day, or you can do an even quicker meal where it's a stir fry or something like that. But yeah, it works. Like, buy the best. And it wasn't me that came up with this. It was somebody who years ago told me this.
Yes,
But
it
the best thing for meal prep though is buying in large quantities. Like, yeah, if you are buying, like, if you're gonna eat pork Monday, chicken Tuesday, turkey Wednesday, beef Thursday, it requires a lot of work. But if you're willing to, you know, buy a turkey and eat that 3 of the next 5 days, for example, it really does make your prep life a million times easier. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's it. Thanks for having us.
Anyone?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions about anything?
You can always reach us too, right, through email or whatever, so we can always.
Giant thing of Vega that I just bought, Vega protein powder, and it's on the bottom 5 list.
I was gonna say it, yeah. Are you looking at his list, his exact
No,
list?
it's a clean label, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
What's on it? Just.
Bottom 5 is Vega, 30-60 cut, Quest, Nature's Best, Garden of Life.